Hi, I'm singer-songwriter and actor Robert Avayanet, and you're tuning into Deeper Than Music.
Deeper Than Music. The core of you, the fans, the truth is deeper than music, deeper than music. Simply the truth is the latest, the newest. It's deeper than music, deeper than music. The core of you, the fans, the truth is deeper than music, deeper than music. Simply the truth is the latest, the newest. It's deeper than music, deeper than music.
Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, wherever you are in the world. Deeper than music, behind every great song, there's an even greater story. I like to say what's up to everybody listening to us on Spreaker, Spotify, Geo7, and also on Out the Box Radio in DFW. Shout outs to Cali D. You can catch us every day, 4:30 between 4:30 and 6 p.m. there, Central Standard Time. And ladies and gentlemen, we have a very special guest, man. This dude got his musical career. It spans over 2 decades, and he started as a radio DJ, and then he studied music production at Berklee College for a brief time. And hey, if you haven't heard of him, I suggest whatever streaming platform you have, please listen to him. You definitely will be impressed. Ladies and gentlemen, we have bluesoulten, artist, songwriter, and producer here on Deeper Than Music. How you doing?
I'm good, brother. I'm good, man. I appreciate the intro, man. Appreciate this time, spending time with you, man. I'm doing great.
No worries. I guess the first question, man, which is kind of interesting because I've done radio. I'm still doing I'm doing a podcast thing and also a radio station thing. I see that you started off as a radio DJ. So how did that all come about?
You know, it's a great question, man. I was in school. You know, I was in college. And, you know, man, I always, in some way, shape, or form, and always loved music. I was always around it, always involved in it. So, you know, I just got fascinated with the business of music and just how it worked. Mm-hmm. And so the closest I could get to that, not on the artist side of it, right, but the closest I can get to that was a DJ. I just love music and love to spin music. And so I started there, and that's kind of what led me into this whole path of music.
Wow, and I like how you say that, because one thing that I always say, and it's even so more so now too, is music is the back door, right? Or radio is the back door, and radio is the gatekeeper. So you got to see it from the back end side, like how radio works, how it functions, the relationship between the artists, the music business, and radio. I want to say one thing that I was forced to do. And I think my old mentor, rest in peace, Ira Hatchett of WBSL, was I was part of a broadcasting academy, and the first thing they did was like, what type of music do you listen to? Okay, you're gonna work radio opposite of what you like. So I got me like in urban radio. You know, had to do country for a little while, and I'm like, yo, this music isn't all that bad.
Yeah.
What was your takeaways? Being an average, like a music lover, being a musician, what was your takeaway from working like being a DJ? Like what lessons did you learn or takeaways?
You know, it's really similar to what you just described, man. Just being involved in a radio station, you get to hear a lot of different types of music. Mm-hmm. And I think just like a lot of kids growing up, man, my musical taste was dominated by whatever my parents listened to. Gotcha. And you know, they were not country, metal, rock. They weren't that, right? And so, man, that's the one thing that I got from music. Number one is just getting a broader perspective, because I was the type of guy, man. Even if my show wasn't on, I would just go hang out in the radio station. Mm. And it was college, so it wasn't like a commercial station that's always dedicated to R&B or hip hop. It was like different shows in different hours. Like you might have one show from 10 to 12 that's classical, the next show from 12 to 2 that's hard rock. And so I would just sit there all day, man. And I remember hearing things sometimes and be like, man, what the heck is that? That sounds really good. And so, you know, I stuck in that. And then the biggest takeaway for me though, man, was I got approached. I forget the guy's name now, man. If I heard his name, I would remember it. But he got some prominence in the promotion at Def Jam at the time. And he had reached out and he said, hey, I want to talk to whoever's in charge of the urban show. And that just happened to be me. And he and I started talking, man. And we started talking about radio promotion. And there was at the time, a group from Def Jam that was coming through the city. And they said, hey, man, listen, I'd really love for you guys to promote them and their show. And And then, man, I really got into the business of music, and like, okay, well, this is how these songs make it to the radio, and this is why 3,000-4,000 people show up at a concert, and these are all the things that happen in the back end. And once that happened, man, and I kind of got that bug on the business side of it, man, it was over for me. I knew it was something I was going to be involved in for the rest of my life in some way, shape, or form.
And I like how you stress the business of music. Like, music is a business. As artists, we want to make our music and just leave it at that. But there is a business, and it's interesting to me. I mean, because like you, like I had to, like, as far as the placements and promotion and companies that help you get placed, and then also accounting for the spins that you spend, how important that sheet is to musicians, because that's how they get paid. And then how promotions and ads are what run the radio station. My question to you is, since you worked radio, do you think radio still has an impact despite streaming and podcasts? Do you think radio is still the same, or what? Just your opinion on radio versus streaming and podcasts and stuff like that.
Yeah, I don't think it's the same, man. I really don't. And just coming from where I came from in music and understanding the radio scene, we at the time, man, this was before streaming, so we were the streaming, right? We were how people discovered music. We were how people found out about concerts coming to town. We were, that entity that people use to figure out music, where now it's so easy for them to go and, you got Spotify, for example, and not only can you find who you like on there, but then they give you recommendations of people similar to them. Yeah. Back in the day, that was us, right? Back in the day, it would be like, oh, you like that song? Well, wait till you hear the one I play right after this. And you just don't have that anymore. Radio, I think, has kind of lost that prominence in that perspective.
Yeah, I would agree with you with that. And then it's like you said, I think, was it, you just made me think of something Pharrell said. He's like, look, the algorithm does not have any emotion. It's just numbers. Yeah. So
yeah, it is. It's just numbers. There's nothing to it other than that. And I'm not a fan of streaming, right? I mean, I literally, man, I took pretty much my entire catalog down off of streaming, and you can only buy most of it on my website now.
And I would say that's pretty smart, because streaming, the money doesn't add up, for one. Yeah, and then it's just flooded, man. Just flooded with, man.
It really is. And I'll tell you the other reason, man, is I went and looked online and streaming, and I'd see one of my songs placed in some playlist. Like, I would never put my song there associated with these three artists. And it's not that I didn't like the artists, it's just like, that's not who I'm targeting.
Gotcha.
And, which is, it's cool because I think you get a chance to get some other exposure, but it's not who I target. And so I get a little frustrated with streaming, not only just from a money perspective, but just how the algorithm works. There's no heart, there's no soul to it.
Yeah. So you went from there, and then you studied music from Berklee. How was that transition, and what was the decision like? Look, this is what I'm going to do.
Yeah, it was, radio for me, man, was like, okay, I got involved in the business side of it. And, fortunately for me, man, my dad was an entrepreneur. And so I always, he was always one that would say, listen, you got to really learn about the business side of things. And then one day, man, I had a mentor in music, and he came up to me and he said, listen, man, he said, music is great. He said, but I want you to pay attention to one thing. And I said, what's that? And at the time I had already expressed to him an interest to kind of get into music in some way, shape, or form. And he said, pick up that CD. And I picked up a CD. He said, I want you to look at the front cover. And I said, okay, I looked at it. He said, turn it over, look at the back cover. And I said, okay, I looked at it. And he said, here's what I want you to remember all the time. He said, the person with their name written in the biggest print makes the smallest amount of money.
Man,
the people with their name in the littlest print make all the money. And man, listen, man, when he said that, wow, I knew, okay, I want to understand this business and how it works. And I want to understand and take all these things that I had learned about writing a song, which I had already dabbled in writing and things like that. But for me, man, I wanted the creative side of it. And as soon as he told me that, I stopped wanting to be anywhere near being an artist. I just wanted to be the writer, the producer, and that's where I think my heart was anyway. But man, once he told me that, man, I was sold on being a part of the music industry. And I was like, okay, I got it. That was like a magic number, right? And I just got it after that. And that's what I started chasing after that, was the business side of it first.
You know what's funny? You say that, and if I remember when Death Row was at its peak, I really didn't know who Suge Knight was. But if you look at the back of the album, executive producer Suge Knight, and now like after Dear Mama came out, and they talked about Pac, and when Pac died, everything was in Suge's name. So what you just said, Tupac's, no disrespect to Pac, Pac is on the front cover. Tupac, All Eyes on Me. Back of the album, small letters, executive producer Suge Knight. I'm sorry, man. You said that moment just was like, aha.
Yes. And so he always told me that, man. He's like this, he would make me look at the liner notes. This was back when CDs had liner notes. He said, read whoever produced it, right? And he said, you're going to start to see patterns, right? Where you see the same producer on Tupac's record, and you see that same name on Snoop Dogg's record. And then you see that same name on Dr. Dre's record. And it's like, this guy's not in any music video. He's not in the scene, but he's getting paid before all of them do.
Yes.
And like I said, man, that's when I also learned that if I was going to dabble in the creation of music, I unapologetically had to own it all. I just wanted to own everything. I didn't want anybody to have a piece of anything I did unless I gave them a piece of it.
And you speak to another thing. Ownership is everything in this business. It's the difference between a Whitney Houston and a Michael Jackson. One of the greatest things Michael Jackson ever did in his life that I didn't know about until later on was when he bought ATV Publishing. Man. And then with Whitney, Whitney's the greatest voice in the world, but she was a songwriter. Dolly Parton got paid. I Will Always Love You. You know what I'm saying?
Dolly Parton got paid off that.
Yes, and I like how you own your own movement. Let's take for example Pharrell and Chad Hugo. Pharrell is the front face of the Neptunes NERD, but you also have Chad in the background, creative soul as well, doing it. And then also when you speak of, you look at the patterns. Like my favorite producers, besides Dr. Dre, Quincy Jones, like you said, he's on the back of a lot of albums. Teddy Riley, he's on the back of a lot of Jimmy Jam and Terry Lewis. I task anyone to look at a majority of Janet Jackson albums. Look at those credits.
Oh my Jimmy, this is their name. It's their name on everything.
Yes.
And that's the in my opinion, man, it's the cool part of the music industry if you're on the right side of it. But I always say, man, is some people just want to be the star, and there's nothing wrong with that either. They're gonna find ways, and hopefully they find ways to make it in the industry. But hopefully they also don't run into a deal where somebody's just taking advantage of them.
Oh yeah,
and it's so easy to do.
But I wanted to ask you, because like who influences you? Like who are your influences musically?
Man, I tell you what, biggest one, man, hands down. I grew up, my parents dominated my radio with Earth, Wind, and Fire.
Oh my goodness. Okay.
And it was just, it was dominated. But what I loved about them was, I used to sit and listen to their records, man. And I think I was always different, man. When I was a kid, there were kids that would, you sit at a party and kids are jumping around and dancing and reciting the lyrics, and I was the kid at the party in the corner trying to get everybody to shut up because I wanted to hear why the hi-hat was panned to the left on this song versus the bass line that sounded like it was over on the right. And I was that kid. And so Earth, Wind, and Fire, man, just presented so much of that, in my opinion, in their music and the way they mixed their records, and then the way that they sang and the way that they wrote the lyrics. And there was a couple writers I know that wrote a lot of their hits as well. I forget the guy's name now, but it was just phenomenal how they would produce a song, man. I just loved it. And so I fell into that music, man, so deep. I was just picking apart every song.
Like it's like I would have loved to have been a fly in the room with what's that Stevie Wonder song? It's the same all over. That song.
Oh yeah.
And Fantasy. Because it's like, how did these guys come up with this song? Like, that song is on a whole nother. That song hey,
It's a different level, man.
Yeah.
And what I used to do, man, is here's the thing about Earth, Wind and Fire Song Fantasy. This was how much I was into it, man. Is there were 2 different albums that was on 2 different albums, and it was 2 different versions.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, 2 different versions. The structure's different. And man, I used to just go back and forth between one and then play the next, and then play the first, play the next, and I would just try to understand, like, how did they play the song twice and it sounds perfect, but it's different? And I don't know the right way to put it, man. It just amazed me that they could play that song like that and play it 2 different ways, but it sounds perfect the same. It sounds like it was meant to be, both of them. And that for me was like, okay, this is music production and songwriting and structure is just something different that a lot of people don't understand.
Wow.
And I loved it. Yeah.
Because they're beyond the stratosphere. And then another question I wanted to ask, because you hit the important cornerstones, like people, now with technology, everything is easily accessible. What was the importance of going to the music school? Like, what foundational tools did it give you? Because I feel Steve Harvey said it best: when you take a shortcut, eventually you're gonna have to take that long road. You're gonna have
to take it.
Exactly. So, and I feel like, I feel like some people, like, they had the whole thing with the blurred lines lawsuit.
Yep.
The lawyer, I felt bad for Pharrell, but there was an important lesson in what this lawyer did. He put a sheet of music in front of Pharrell and asked Pharrell to read it, and Pharrell was like, I don't feel comfortable reading it, and slide it down. I was like, that lawyer just killed his legitimacy as a producer right there. But
right there, just killed it right there. Yeah.
But the importance of going to music school, like, what foundational tools did you learn?
Yeah, it was a great experience, man, and I wanted to do it. I actually went into it without the intention of ever trying to enroll at Berklee. I just wanted to go in and take a couple of classes, things that I was interested in, because for me, man, it really goes back to the previous question. You're talking about Earth, Wind and Fire, right? Song structure, songwriting, and what I learned about the class at Berklee, the primary class I took was song production. And I was asking the teacher before I ever signed up, I forget the guy's name, but I asked him, I said, well, what kind of songs are we going to talk about, right? How does this work? And he said, well, we're going to look at some popular songs and we're going to talk about the song structure. And I said, okay, well, which ones, right? And he said, well, there's a, man, I forget the name of the group now, man. It's an older group, but they had a song called My Sharona.
My Sharona. Yeah. Okay.
Yes.
Yeah.
Them. And then he said, we're also going to study Tina Turner, What's Love Got to Do With It?
Okay.
And he said, and he said, during the class, I remember, man, he said, here's what I want everybody to listen to is when you listen to What's Love Got to Do With It, man, the song structure is not typical. It doesn't sound like it when you just listen to the song, but there's like and I forget the way that he put it, but like after the verse, there's like it's like an 8-bar break before the next verse, but they cut it off at 7 and went right into the next verse, right? And what that did for me, man, was to realize that song structure does not have to be by the book, and the structure is just there to help guide you into what feels right or what is important for the song.
Yeah.
And it was phenomenal for me to listen because I had never thought about What's Love Got to Do With It that way. I just never did. Yeah. And even the song My Sharona is the same way. It's not the typical structure. And once I heard those things, man, it was like a light bulb went off, and I thought, oh my God, these people wrote these songs and they're songs that I liked and that I loved, and it just was amazing to learn that the impact of song structure on songwriting and the impact of song structure on the feeling that you get from a song. I used to think it was all about the instruments and the voice, but the song structure was equally important in that. And here's the most important thing I learned, man, is that, the voice and the instruments control the emotion of the listener, but the song structure controls when you get there.
Gotcha. Okay.
Right.
That makes sense. Yeah.
And so for me, it was like, wow, that's what made all these songs like Fantasy, why they could rearrange the structure in both versions of Fantasy. And it's just getting the listener to the point where they want them to be when they want them to be there. And
Gotcha.
once I learned that, like I said, I was hooked, man, at Berklee. And that for me was like, oh my God, I now I got to go right. Then it was like, okay, now I'm going to get back on this drum set I learned when I was a kid and getting in front of this piano, because now I realized that I already thought I had a good handle on creating the emotion with the voice and the instruments. But now it's like, now I can control when the listener's going to get there.
Gotcha. Now you know how to guide and navigate.
Now I know how to guide them through that process, right? Where if you listen to some songs, man, it's just like revving up to 5 in emotion, and by the first minute and a half, the listener's tired and they're like, man, I can't take this, right? But with song structure in A section, B section, C section, you can control how the listener listens, and that for me was the best lesson I could learn.
Because that's kind of like you think about like a Michael Jackson Thriller. They guide you. He's telling you the story, and then you get to the climax, right? You get to the musically, but then it also worked in the video. Hey, I'm gonna guide you story, and then we're gonna get to the climax. What is your creative process? I mean, you're so deep into the music. Like, how do you? And I'm sure it's pretty fluid, but how does it go from an idea to an actual song?
Yeah, it's, my process is typically, I think unlike some people in urban music, I don't start with drums. Right? Mm-hmm. Drums for me are later. And I think it's because I grew up playing the drums that I realized that, okay, the drums are a really critically important piece. But again, going back to what I learned in production, it's like the other instruments control the emotion. The drums add to the emotion and can in some cases drive it. But for me, man, I start off with some melody I hear in my head, and sometimes it might be a chorus, like just words that flow together that I hear that I'm like, oh man, that's a really great thought. And sometimes it might just be a keyboard part, or maybe even a bass line, right? And I might even hear the bass line in my head, right? But then for me, it's about shaping the music, and I usually then shape the music and kind of put together I think what most people would typically call like an instrumental, where somebody can top line it. And in my case, I do the top lining, right, which is just writing the lyrics to a foundation of instruments. Yeah. And then I'll start filling in the lyrics, man. And then from there, I'll probably take for a song to finish completely, man, it take me about 2 weeks if I'm working fast. And the reason for that is like my process, man, is like I'll write the music, at least some type of structure to help me write. I'll start putting structure to the music. Like, do I want that person to get here emotionally, and when do I want them to get there, and how do I want to tell the story? Does it need a bridge? Does it need a chorus? Does it need a vamp section? And I'll start thinking about all those things and trying to put the music down to help with that. Once I write the first version of the lyrics, I generally just do some kind of scratch recording of the lyrics so I hear how it flows. Yeah. Then I go back and I update the music again, kind of evolving the music. I'll start to get more serious about the drum performance, because I realize that, there's a lot of transitional elements in a drum kit that a lot of people use creatively to start signifying to a listener that something's going to change. Like if you listen to, we'll talk about Thriller. You listen to that, right? I mean, the drummers are there, and it sounds like they're kind of in the background, but those drummers, man, and the way Quincy Jones produces it, he was a master at transitioning the user and signaling to the user that it's time to start changing emotion. And he was a master, like, in my opinion, he could master that by one tom hit. And it just signals to the user like something's about to happen. And again, you kind of, then you're like telling the user, the listener, is like you're telling the listener like the emotion's about to change. And so I'll start adding in a drum performance to start signaling when things are going to happen. Like the typical beat behind the verse is like, okay, now you're riding with me, you're here along this ride, and right before it goes to the hook, I need to change something really quick in the drums to let the listener know, okay, something is about to go, is going to turn right, or something like that. And so I'll start putting in that. And then, man, what I'll do is, then once I get to a point where I want to record the vocals for real, I'll go get a vocalist. The vocalist finishes, and then I go back and update the music again and just keep tweaking the music. So for me, for a lot of people, I think that, and I'll say this, and I don't mean this in a disparaging way, but a lot of people will write the music, then or record the lyrics and say, I'm done. And to me, that's not a song producer. That's not a producer. Right?
And I like how you say, because you make me think, like, especially in urban radio, especially with hip hop, is like, hey, with Kanye West, a phenomenal producer. Hey, I did like 20 beats this summer. It's like a factory, right? But like you like, hey, I like it's quality, quantity to you, and I like your attention to detail rather than, hey, I'm just gonna kick out this beat. Okay, the artist did this, and we're done. And to me, it's like a great producer enhances the performance. And I like how you say, I'll go back and change it. Okay, I'll switch. It's the details. The details in the music matter. And I like that you speak to that.
Yeah, and I'll tell you something very similar to that too, man. That bugs me about modern music. And it bugs me not from it's not good, right? I think a lot of it's good. I think some of it's not, but that's in every era. I could say that about any era of music. Some of it's good, some of them I don't like, some I don't. But here's the thing about music that I target, man, that I think doesn't happen a lot today, is that if you listen to a song, I'm just going to call out an artist, like a song by Drake, right? If you take his lyrics off of the beat and you put Chris Brown on there, it's going to sound right.
Yeah.
It's going to sound like it can match, right? But if you go back and if you listen to that song, Fantasy by Earth, Wind and Fire, and you try to put somebody else's voice on there beside Philip Bailey and Maurice White, it ain't going to work.
It's not going to work. Yeah.
It's not going to work. You can't, which is why they tried to reincarnate Earth, Wind and Fire with the Raphael Sadiq, and it bombed. It's not going to work, right?
No, it's not going to work. This is not going to work.
That's what I strive for, where if you listen to one of my songs, like especially on the last album called This Is Worth It, if you listen to any of those songs, what I strive for is a marriage between the vocalist and the music so tight that if you took away the vocalist and put somebody else on there, you'd say, yeah, that ain't right.
Yeah.
And that to me is music production, is making sure that this song is not going to sound right with anybody else on it. And that to me is the measure of a great producer, is producing a song where you can't interchange any part of that song and have it still be good.
And like, look at Quincy Jones. I mean, even with like Michael Jackson this guy did stuff with Sinatra. You got Give Me the Night. You got the man has done like any, and like you said, it wouldn't work. It wouldn't work with any artist, like a Bad, for example. That was made for Michael Jackson. That ain't gonna work with any other artist. Ain't gonna work with anybody else.
Even the way you say "Give Me the Night," like, "Give Me the Night," you can't take anybody else's voice and put it on that song.
Exactly.
And that's what I strive for in music production. I think that's what a music producer is. I think that, here's what I'll say. I think that's the difference between a producer and a beat maker.
Yeah. Right? I could see that, man, because I feel like a lot, and even with popular music, it's cookie cutter. Here we go. It's like a factory. But then you got those artists like somebody told me this a long time ago. Like, if you want to make an impact, create a movement, and then you got your musicians that are movement capable. Your Quincy Joneses, and people on that level. So you mentioned one of your albums. For the listeners that haven't heard any of your music, and I'm pretty sure after this they're gonna be like, hey, I gotta check this guy out. Can you describe your catalog? Can you give us your catalog and your work?
I can, man. Yeah, it's been a journey, man. It's at first, the first 3 albums, I actually planned them at the same time. I actually wrote most of the first 3 albums at the same time, but I released them pretty much one every year for the first 3 years. And that was kind of like, what happened, man, is I produced this record, and it was an instrumental, and I had, I don't know, man, 60, 70 instrumentals, much like most people do that are into music, nothing different. But I had one in particular, and I don't know why, man, but I had this company reached out to me and said, hey, we want to use this instrumental. I forget, I had it posted somewhere. They said, we want to use this for some commercial, something. I don't even remember what it was, man. And I just, kind of in a way, this is before I actually did anything really serious in music and other than just writing music. And I said, yeah, sure, whatever, right? Because I didn't really believe in it at that time, whatever it was. And so I gave it to them. They asked me to sign some deal, and I just signed a contract. It was small. And about 9 months later, a royalty check showed up at my house. And I thought, wow, they actually did something with this song. And so I started playing these songs for my friends these instrumentals, and they said, man, you're crazy if you don't release these things. And so the first 3 albums were really dominated by instrumentals, but I had been writing lyrics all along. And so you know, I at the time I was using some live instrumentation, some synthesis, things like that. And I got through those first 3 albums, and then the 4th album, I kind of got tired of the instrumental type of sound. I still loved it, but I got tired of it, meaning that I wanted to really have lyrics and more feeling and more personality into the songs and be more relatable. So I started writing with other lyricists, myself, and then others. And so I put out another album called 10%, which was a little bit, I think a little bit less urban. It was somewhat urban. I think it would probably fit today in what you hear on the radio more often than not. And then after that, the journey continued, man. And then I kind of caught the bug from a lyrics perspective, because in my journey, I met a lot of great vocalists, man. And so I had a friend of mine who was putting together he was an independent filmmaker, and he asked me to kind of write, I guess, if you would, a soundtrack for this independent film. And I did, and it ended up being the album called Songs About You.
Ladies and gentlemen, stay tuned for part 2 of this interview with my special guest, bluesoulten, on Deeper Than Music.
Maybe I found what we could mean. Maybe I found what love could be. You're all that I can see. It's better than I'm used to. It's stronger than I'm used to.